Hey everyone, so I know I haven't done a video in a very long time. Reason being was I just didn't have any ideas of what to film, to be honest, and I didn't have any video ideas. But as I was about to leave my apartment to go to work, I just got a phone call and both my students had canceled, and therefore I'm already done up and everything, so why not? I thought I'd come back with a video. And as you'll see from the title, this is going to be a little different from my typical videos, which is where I help foreigners coming to Taiwan. But this time I want to talk about some general pieces of advice for people who want to learn or improve upon their English, okay? Now, to give you a little bit of a brief background is I teach mostly conversational English, okay, which is I kind of grill my students on their grammatical mistakes, their pronunciation mistakes, and I repeatedly tell them and I remind them so that they kind of get rid of these bad habits. And I also teach, various different types of tests such as TOEFL and SATs, mostly in the listening and speaking portion. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of what I'm about to say. And realize what I'm about to say is it's very general, okay? So to some of you, it might be very common sense, okay? But to some people, they might need this reminder, or they might need to know this when they actually want to improve upon their English, okay? So I'm just going to try to say this as concisely and briefly as possible, all right? But we'll see how that goes. So number one is, of course, you should be reading and listening different types of material on a daily or weekly basis, okay? When it comes to reading, of course, read different types of articles, and when it comes to watching something, I'm going to say find something that's of your interest. Don't do it because you're trying to improve your English based on a textbook, okay? Of course, read your textbook if you're in college or something, but find something of interest, because the more interested you are in something, the more likely you're going to absorb it, okay? It's just like saying, I'm okay with math, but if I'm not a fan of math, so if I'm reading a math textbook for the sake of trying to sophisticate myself for reasons outside of my own interest, I'm not going to absorb it or remember it as likely, okay? So with reading, of course, don't always limit yourself, but try to find something of your interest so you're more likely to absorb it. When it comes to listening to something, of course, there's the very popular TED Talks, which is a great platform to learn something new, sophisticated, inspiring. But realize what TED Talks is, they're generally using more formal language, okay? Obviously, they're doing a big presentation, and therefore they have to speak more properly. Whereas with YouTube, if you're already watching me, you're on YouTube, subscribe to someone of your interest, okay, that will use more typical everyday conversational English, right? For me, for instance, I like video games, so I like to watch Rooster Teeth, or I watch different Let's Plays, because I don't have the time to play the physical game myself, or I don't have the money, but I will watch these shows so I know what's the latest news on video games, for instance. But for someone who's trying to improve their English, they'll also learn the vocabulary that might help them talk about their hobby or their interest, okay? Or you'll most likely learn, again, more conversational everyday language, meaning slang, what's current phrasing, since English is changing every day, and also based on location, okay? Next thing is, I'm going to talk about when people go abroad. Okay, that's the big thing, is when people go abroad or they're going on a trip, okay? Whether it's the primary or secondary reason, which is of learning English, it doesn't matter. The thing is, most people will go in a group, or most typically with a friend, okay? And oftentimes, I'm not saying to abandon your friend when you're in some different country, go out at midnight and go to some alleyway to meet friends. I'm not saying that, okay? Definitely don't do that. I'm saying you should still be open to making new friends. And oftentimes, people stay glued together because they're both either self-conscious, okay, or there's a dependent relationship, okay. Usually one friend or person has better English, and the person who probably needs to learn more English is using that friend as a crutch and they're not learning proper English themselves, right? They're having a translator, basically. To me, I wonder why go there in the first place, right? So learn to be independent when you're speaking to someone, okay? Even if that person has better English, I don't care. Find your own opportunities to also speak and improve yourself. Build that confidence, right? Another thing is with friends is sometimes you guys are so comfortable with each other that you tease one another. So for instance, maybe someone has improper pronunciation, improper accent. The friend might tease them about it and completely crush their confidence in speaking. So therefore, when you go abroad with someone, you have to establish these rules, which number one is you have to only use English 100% of the time. And you cannot have somebody translating. Each person should speak English at all times. Another thing is to not put anybody down. You're both in the same boat, okay? I don't care if somebody is more proficient or fluent, but they are also learners, okay? So they have no way to criticize you of having bad or improper English, okay? Also, that's not a really good friend if they're doing that to you, okay? If you're both going for the reason or goal to improve your English, you both should be motivating and encouraging each other, right? It's as if you were going on a diet plan with a group and there's someone telling you to eat ice cream or chocolate. That's not the type of person you want to be on this journey with. You want to be on a journey with someone who's going to motivate you. So stick to someone who has the same goals and is, most importantly, respectful as well when you go to these places. Another thing is, even if your friend may be encouraging, sometimes when you go with a friend, that person themselves feels self-conscious, okay? They're afraid that when they go home with someone, they go back to their country with someone, they might talk about their experience, or they might say, they might kind of talk about how you in the end after you leave that country, which is true sometimes, but that's again not a very good encouraging friend. But sometimes the person themselves are self-conscious about their own pronunciation, or typically they say it's their accent, okay? Now, I want to point this out, which is pronunciation versus accent is extremely different. When it comes to pronunciation, that is something you should improve because it's a standard, right? It's universally what people will understand if you pronounce it that way, okay? Whereas with accent, however, is something very difficult to change unless you're an actor who's really good at masking your native accent and you're doing it for money, right? But when it comes to accent, especially if it's not your native language, realize you shouldn't have to change your accent. You should embrace your accent. In fact, when people hear people of different accents, right, it's usually interesting, attractive, or even exotic to that person. So you should always embrace your accent. Don't let your accent be something that makes you self-conscious of actually utilizing your English, right? Build that confidence. That's the most important thing. Another thing is when you're not glued to your friend, okay, and you're actually speaking to a native English speaker, is let's say you say something a little bit strange to the native speaker. You won't know this, but that person most likely will repeat what you say, the same information, right? But repeat what you said. And that's sort of a hint, okay? They're not doing it for that purpose. The native speaker is doing it for the purpose of making 100% sure they understand you correctly. But for the learner, they should take that information and realize it's sort of a polite and indirect way of telling you this is the more conventional way that people say this, okay? And that's when you become an active and avid listening learner, okay? What I mean by that is when you hear some new phrasing, or especially someone indirectly in a polite manner corrects you, you should make a mental note of that and realize, oh, okay, I've been saying it wrong this time, okay, most likely. Same thing when you watch some show or listen to some program, is when you learn some new phrasing, some new slang, some new expression, make a mental note of that, right? or always be aware of how people in that area speak. That's how you'll really improve upon your English, okay? For instance, so a lot of students in Taiwan would say, I want to go to home, or I'm going to go to home, okay? You'll notice people just say, I'm going to go home, okay? Go home. There's no additional to between go and home, okay? So make mental notes of this, okay? So that you all will correct these commonly repeated mistakes. And the reason is because they're still translating. That's a whole nother topic. Or sometimes, often, I have two students who have never studied abroad or even stayed abroad for any long duration of time. And they watch shows like Grey's Anatomy, and another one watches Vampire Diaries. And they always come back to me and they say they're surprised by the new phrases or words they learn, or some slang, okay? Or some expression from different countries that they use. And that shows to me that they're an avid listener, is that they're interested in this topic and they're learning and absorbing something new, okay? Alright, another thing is, let's say you don't understand what the person is speaking, just ask, right? They're going to use a simplified manner so that you can also guess what the prior word they used that you probably weren't exposed to before, what it means, right? They'll use a simplified manner. But let's say you actually do learn some new word, and whether you read it or you heard it, oftentimes students will write in their beautiful notebook the English word or the phrase, and then write the Chinese translation, okay? Now, most of the times they use Google Translate, which is a terrible idea, let me tell you, because when I use Google Translate to talk to my cousins in Chinese, I've almost lost them as, my cousins, or I've almost lost friendships over that, because Google Translate will destroy your life, right? Because you don't know you've offended someone because they gave you a terrible translation. So don't ever use Google Translate, please. You'll just become a very lonely person. I tell my students this all the time. But let's say oftentimes students will use the English to Chinese dictionary or English to whatever dictionary. Now, I'm not really familiar with that system, right? I see a lot of people use the English or electronic dictionary, and I don't know how many definitions it provides. Regardless, I don't care if it provides all of the definitions or not. You should be learning how to interpret and understand the English definition, right? And when you use the English definition, you're going to see a huge list of the way that vocabulary word can be used in the different definitions, okay? Other thing is, when you plug in the English definition back into the sentence to see if it makes sense, if you found the correct definition or not, you're going to find that sometimes the definition still doesn't make any sense if you plug in all definitions. Then that's an indicator, probably, most likely, you need to translate a phrase, okay? Meaning more than one word, okay? And with that phrase, it could be an idiom, it could be some slang, it could be some proverb, okay? With the Chinese dictionary, you're not going to get these definitions or explanations, right? So instead, utilize the English dictionary, get used to that habit. That's the only way you're ever going to learn the proper different words, right? And also, let's say, for example, the word running. The definition might be to run, meaning it uses its own word to define itself. So either you could define the simplified word run, or you could look at the synonyms, okay? Synonyms are typically listed under the definition. But realize with synonyms is you'll recognize a similar word to the definition you're looking for, okay? Or the word you're looking for. But it's not 100% the same, okay? They're similar, but not 100% the same. But at least they'll give you a basic idea of what the word you're looking up means, alright? So these are the basic ways you should be learning English, okay? Build confidence first. Don't ever feel discouraged from learning English, okay? I don't care what your accent is, how you pronounce things. Eventually, that's the only way you're ever going to go far with your English ability and become fluent or proficient, alright? So, if you have any questions maybe about TOEFL or anything, I'll try to answer them down in the comments below. Or if it's a video suggestion, I'll try to film it if I have enough material to actually make a video. Again, these are the only basic pieces of advice or my opinion that I could think of in a short amount of time. I probably have more tips, but in the meantime, this is all that I have to offer. Okay, again, leave your comments and questions down below, or even video suggestions. That would be awesome. And have a good day. Bye, everyone.